accompanied by John Harris as always. And we are back today to share our mock drafts for the 2023 NFL Draft, which are always fun. We both will be sharing our own. We're gonna, kind of poke and prod, question some picks of each other, maybe, or applaud them or and such. So that'll be fun to do. Before we get started, obviously, I just want to preface: I had no trades in mind. I'm assuming you went the same, John, or did you actually maybe incorporate a trade or two?
No, I didn't do any trades.
Okay, I figured it's always difficult. It's tough. It's a whole another bag of worms because then regardless. Um, and there's another burning question that I had, but I forgot about it. Darn, that sucks. Anyway, nonetheless, definitely. Oh yes, the question was, I forget how. So once again, for me, I did it. Aaron, the GM for each and every team. Did you also do that as well, or would you kind of find a balance between what you think they're going to do as opposed to what you would do?
Most of it was me. There's a few, like when I did rival NFC East teams, because obviously I'm rooting on their downfall. I went with what I think realistically they would take to try and remove my bias. But for the most part, pretty much everybody else was my personal opinions.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's it for me. I mean, not 100% me because I did factor in obviously team needs
Same.
as well, positional needs as too. So yeah, okay. So we're kind of on the same spectrum there. Obviously, our mocks will not be the same, unlike our first two rankings of the year. But anyhow, John, I'll let you go first as always. You can start from the top, number one, the Carolina Panthers sitting at one. We would love to hear your 2023 mock draft, and you can, I guess, start with the first five.
All right. So for me, number one overall, obviously the Carolina Panthers, they traded up, and it's no secret that they're taking a quarterback. And I have them going with my number one quarterback in the class, CJ Stroud. Obviously, I mean, it was between him and Bryce Young. I didn't feel like they would take, Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. They're just kind of projects. And ultimately, for me, CJ Stroud, I think he's the better quarterback. I don't think that he is a Trevor Lawrence level prospect to where it's like, okay, he's a clear-cut, obvious number one overall pick. But ultimately, when you're going to trade up like that, you're going after a QB usually. And I think the Panthers certainly need one. They've been in QB hell ever since Cam Newton kind of, started to decline and, eventually left. So I think that CJ Stroud can finally give their franchise some direction. It's unfortunate that he won't have the greatest of weapons considering that DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey are now gone. But other than that, I do think that CJ Stroud is a great pick. Now, number two is where things get spicy because I wouldn't say I'm a Bryce Young hater, so don't take this the wrong way for anyone watching, but I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily the biggest Bryce Young fan. And I think that the Texans are in a very unique scenario where out of all the teams in the top 10, I can almost guarantee that the Texans, regardless of who they pick, will be in the top 10 again next year. That could be speculation on my part because, you never know. They could have a big boom here. But to me, if I was in the Texans spot, out of all the QBs in this class, I don't like any of them nearly as much as I like some of the quarterbacks coming out next year. And if CJ Stroud is off the board, I'm personally not settling. So I went for Jalen Carter, who I think is the best player in the overall draft class. If you have any comments about that pick specifically, because I know that it might be a little bit of a hot take.
Actually, not. I mean, from what I've seen on the buzz, from Bleacher Report, and I wish I could have them, but the general buzz seems to be all of a sudden recently that the Texans are not looking at a quarterback at number two.
Really?
So that's what the buzz has been. Like even Adam Schefter's reported it that they seem to be looking elsewhere. So you may be on the same wavelength, John, as they are apparently. So yeah, I just wanted to add that because it's very likely too that, especially with everything that's gone on with Jalen Carter. He was most people had him on top of the board, had a shaky pro day, but he could easily find himself not too bad at still being the first non-quarterback off the board.
Yeah, I do think that some of the off-the-field stuff could potentially see him drop, but I don't know. The fact that it happened, once again, not like too close to the draft, I feel like teams will kind of cool off. Like the draft is just such an interesting time because we talk about like Laramie Tunsil when that video came out, like what was it, the day before? And all of a sudden you see it affect his draft stock.
It was on draft night, I think, actually.
Oh,
Or,
it
like,
was
right
the
before
day
draft.
of. Okay,
It was like
yeah,
during the
so-
draft. It was a thing.
So even worse. So then, like that, yeah, we see slips like that for Jalen Carter. It didn't happen, that timely. So I do think that some of that stuff might wear off, and his draft stock won't be as affected. Will he go number 2? I don't know. Realistically, I think. I mean, if the draft buzz is saying maybe they're not interested in a QB, then who knows? But my gut would say they probably still take a quarterback. Anyway, number 3 is the Cardinals. Once again, we're not doing trades, but I do think that this would be a prime position for any team to trade up. I've already heard some rumblings of maybe the Titans if they are wanting a QB. I don't think they will, but if they are, maybe they're sold on Bryce Young. Maybe he's here if the Texans don't take him. The Titans would theoretically trade up here because with the Cardinals not needing one, this is great trade territory. But once again, we didn't do one because I'm not going to speculate on hypothetical deals that most likely won't happen. So I stuck with the Cardinals here, and since they don't need a quarterback, we're not taking Young, we're not taking Richardson, any of these guys. I think there's quite a few needs, but I think that when you're number 3 overall and you have so many different holes you need to fill, I just ended up going Will Anderson Jr. out of Alabama here. I'm not sold on Will Anderson as much as some people might be. I've heard a lot of talk of him being like the most home run defensive end prospect there is. That said, I don't feel like in this specific class there is a home run defensive end prospect like a Myles Garrett or a Jadeveon Clowney. But I do think that Will Anderson is a really solid, safe pick. And once again, for the Cardinals, they just have so many needs that I think you might as well just start with the defensive end. I think that's always a good spot to try and help yourself out in the trenches. Now, number 4, the Colts. They do need a quarterback. They have needed a quarterback, similarly to the Panthers, ever since Andrew Luck has called it a career. And so this is where we're going to have Bryce Young. He's finally going to go off the board. Once again, in real life, we could see a trade up to maybe 2 or 3 for a team to go snag Bryce Young if one of these teams, but obviously the Cardinals won't, but if the Houston doesn't want to take a QB. But here, the Colts, in my mock draft, they end up getting their guy in Bryce Young. 5 is where things can once again get interesting, but for me, I don't think it's that interesting. I know a lot of people are talking about maybe the potential of Seattle taking a QB, but I just don't see that happening. I think that they're going to be content at least for another year with Geno Smith, and also considering that Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud are off the board, I'm going to play it safe and take the guy who I think is arguably the best defensive end of the class, and that is Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech. Really solid edge rusher. And I think that Seattle has just historically struggled ever since like kind of the end of the Legion of Boom era to really get any pressure on the quarterback. I mean, I think back to when they traded for Carlos Dunlap and like he instantly just became their best pass rusher with like 5 sacks. Like they've had some struggles. Anyway,
and to be fair, they had to miss LJ Collier. Yeah,
true.
Yeah, he didn't really work out as a first round guy. So yeah, I love that too with Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, and I think honestly, once again, like I said, we didn't rate or rank our defensive ends, and so I didn't actually go in and like do a ton of research like I did some of the other position groups. I did like do a little bit on some of these top guys. So if we did rank them, I might end up swapping Anderson and Tyree Wilson because I am a big Tyree Wilson fan. But just off the gut of what I do know and kind of what I expect to happen in real life, I went Will Anderson before Wilson. Anyway, number 6, this is like the most plug and play one for me in the whole draft. The Lions cornerbacks suck. They just got rid of Jeff Okudah, so we're taking the best cornerback on my list, Devin Witherspoon. I wouldn't be shocked if you also have him going there. I know as a Packers fan that might pain you, but they could not stop anybody, and in a division where the Bears just added DJ Moore. You got Justin Jefferson. The Packers have Christian Watson emerging and potentially could get some new weapons once we get down here in 15. So there's just a lot of good receivers in this in this division, and the Lions, you need to have someone to match up with it. They add Devon Witherspoon, and there you go, good to go. Number 7, the Las Vegas Raiders. They don't have Derek Carr anymore, and they haven't replaced him, right? They don't have a QB outside of like.
They have Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh yeah, I forgot they signed Jimmy G. Well, that doesn't affect my my pick here because honestly, it might actually encourage them to do it even more. I have them going Anthony Richardson out of Florida. he is a raw prospect, and with Jimmy G there, that means he could get a year or two on the bench. But ultimately, I just think that the Raiders, they're too QB needy. You got Devontae Adams. You need to make a splash. You can't just have Jimmy Garoppolo and think that some of these guys are going to stick around. There's already been Josh Jacobs and some other players voicing some concern after Darren Waller was traded. And so the Raiders, I think they're going to want to reinvigorate the fan base, get them excited. Anthony Richardson could be that guy because he's got a sky-high ceiling. Ultimately, I do think he's a little raw. I'm not sure if he'd be worth, a top 10 pick in my eyes, but the potential is there, and so I'm not going to ever blame a team for going out and getting your quarterback, whatever it takes in the first round, if you believe that that's the guy. Number 8, I didn't really know who the Falcons would take here. I feel like they could go with a lot of things. I know that PFF says that their needs are QB, wide receiver. I don't really necessarily think they're going to take one of those. I think they're going to have Ritter another year. I think they're going to be content with Pitts and Drake London, and also they didn't even really use their weapons that much. So to take another weapon, especially a receiving weapon in the top 10, to then do potentially what you did last year, I'm just not sold on it. So I went with an edge rusher. We're going to have to scroll down a little bit here because I think he's not ranked as highly as some people might. Anyway, I have him taking Nolan Smith. Here's my logic here. I'm not necessarily sure, once again, we didn't rank our defensive ends, so I'm not sure where I would rank him. But it's very clear that the Atlanta Falcons love some athletic freaks, okay? They went out and got Kyle Pitts. They got Drake London. They get these big, fast players that are just physically freakish. And Nolan Smith's a Georgia kid, so I think that the fit just makes sense. I think he fits the sort of style that they're going for with the kind of athlete. And I think that as a local kid, the fan base will love the pick. So we got Nolan Smith out of Georgia going to the Atlanta Falcons. At number 9...
and I don't think that's too crazy, Nolan Smith. Kind of seen him mid. Some people are high in him. My boy Sims is high in him. He's his third-ranked edge. And I watched a little bit of him too. And I will say this, you mentioned Tyree Wilson, Will Anderson earlier. Like, I'm just saying purely from a pass rush standpoint, I think Nolan Smith may be better than Will Anderson, or at least have a higher ceiling. I mean, but obviously Will Anderson, better all-around player, so that's why he's higher. But yeah, I do like that for the Falcons. They've needed edge ever since Vic Beasley had even then Vic Beasley was kind of a flash in the pan, as we all kind of saw. It was like a 1-2 year stretch. Then they got Tack McKinley. That didn't work out. So yeah, I could easily see them selling their fans on, hey, he's a Georgia kid, SEC, all that.
Right.
But yeah, so I could easily see the Falcons going there.
And I think he just also has versatility too. With the athlete that he is, you can use him in some different ways. Obviously, he should be playing edge, but just with that kind of speed, all those kind of things, you can do a lot with a guy like that. Anyway, at number 9 for the Chicago Bears, this is where I'm going to finally see an offensive lineman come off the board. They need it badly. You got Justin Fields. You finally added a receiver in DJ Moore. You got a good tight end. You got a good young running back. If you just want to clean up the offense, and I think that that's what they need to do, continue to build around Justin Fields, this is where we're going to finally see them take a tackle. Now, the interesting part here is some people have Peter Skoronski as the top tackle in the class. I think that he's got some problems with the short arms. I think he could end up moving into guard. And so I started looking at some of these other tackles, and I really was sold on Broderick Jones from Georgia as the guy that they would probably take, because in terms of size, he's a freak. The guy's a monster. He's a people mover. He might not be the most sound in terms of technique, all those kind of things, but in terms of pure power, size, and potential, the guy has it. And I think that when you have a mobile QB like Justin Fields, you can take someone who's a little bit more raw, that might take a little bit more time, because Fields, if the guy's still working on stuff and he misses a few assignments, Fields can still make some plays. So I think Broderick Jones kind of fits their timeline of, we're not competing right now, but maybe in a year or two we could be. So I have Broderick Jones as the first tackle off the board because of his sky-high potential. Number 10, we got the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is where I tried to remove my bias. I think that ultimately, in terms of just logically, I'm thinking about the Eagles love to build in the trenches. They obviously took Jordan Davis, and he is just a mass monster, a hog molly, as David Gettleman would have said. And so I think that he is in a good spot to cover for, one of the defensive tackle spots. But the Eagles, they run the 4-3. They use 2 defensive tackles. Javon Hargrave is gone. Fletcher Cox is still there, but I can't imagine for much longer. I think they're going to want to invest and get their defensive tackle partner right next to him. And so that's where I got, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, Kalijah Kancey. I have no idea how to say his name, from Pittsburgh. Size is a little bit of a concern, but he's a good pass rushing interior defensive lineman. I think he does have versatility to potentially move out to the edge. And the reason I like that for Philly is because they've had some defensive ends, although they do play 4-3, who would probably be classified as like a 3-4 defensive end, that they move them out there anyway. So I think that he just provides them versatility on where they want to go. And once again, if they do want to put him on the inside, you already got Jordan Davis, who can be the mass monster, and then Kancey can be the one that's going to try and put pressure on the quarterback on third down specifically. For number 11, keep it short and simple. Tennessee, the offensive line play was not as good as it should have been last year. They were dealing with injuries. They were dealing with a lot of stuff. I think they go with one of the more versatile offensive linemen in the class. I already said it. I think Skoronski could end up playing guard or tackle. I think that Tennessee loves this guy, and I think that he fits perfectly for what they potentially need. He can fill multiple holes, so I'm going to go with Skoronski to Tennessee. And also, if you're going to continue to run the ball a ton behind Derrick Henry, Malik Willis is going to be mobile. You got to give him blocking. At number 12, the Texans are back on the clock. Previously, we did not have them taking a quarterback. We had Jalen Carter, and I'm going to stick with that. We're still not going QB. They just traded away Brandon Cooks to the Dallas Cowboys, so what are they going to do? They're going to replace him with another receiver. My number 1 receiver in the class, Quentin Johnson at a TCU.
Stays in Texas. So.
Yep, stays in Texas too. Yeah, TCU, not too far away from Houston. I mean, a couple-hour drive. Well, yeah, I don't know how far. It might be like 3.
You could probably take a plane, right? It's like
yeah.
probably 30. I don't know how far. Like
very,
an hour.
very
know
close.
Yes.
And also, I mean, they've kind of been missing like an elite alpha receiver since the Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins days. So I think that Quentin Johnson can try to be that guy. We go on to number 13, the New York Jets, and there was only one thought in my mind at this pick. We need offensive line help. If you're going to go get Aaron Rodgers, and if you are, this pick just realistically might not be here for the Jets. It might be a Packers selection. That would change things. But as of right now, this is still their pick. So let's say hypothetically they get Aaron Rodgers and they still have this pick, or they don't get Aaron Rodgers and they roll it back with the QBs they have on the roster. The offensive line play was still pretty horrendous, and we need a tackle. And we're going to go out and get Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. Just a really sound tackle. I was tempted to have him potentially go to the Bears to reunite with Justin Fields, but in terms of a guy who can play right away, I think that he fits that a little more than Broderick Jones. And Jones for Georgia, he can fit that Bears timeline a little bit better.
Yeah,
so,
sorry, I just want to add.
Go ahead.
In my initial, not my actual mock, my first draft, I did have Paris Johnson going to the Bears. So yeah, and I agree with you. Ryan me a lot of Bakhtiari. Like we didn't get to talk tackles, but like he gave me shades of Bakhtiari. So I love that pick. That would be kind of ironic for Rodgers to get if he does go. If the Jets keep that pick and the trade ever happens, he gets a guy similar to Bakhtiari.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that the great part for the Jets here is that, like, say Johnson does go to the Bears. This is a deep tackle class, and I mean, we'll get it. You'll see it throughout my class, but there's a couple more tackles that are going to be going in the rest of this draft, and that includes this next pick, the New England Patriots. It says they need a QB, but I think they're not going to go for Will Levis. I don't think that they're going to view that as much of a change from Mac Jones. So I think they're going to have to beef up the trenches. The offensive line play was not up to snuff for a Bill Belichick offense. I think they're going to be upset that Skoronski ended up getting taken at 11. Also, of course, it's going to be Vrabel, a guy who knows Bill Belichick very well, taking an offensive lineman who probably would have fit in that system so well. But we're still going to take a tackle here, and this is where we're going to take Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. I don't think he allowed a single sack last year on to Hendon Hooker at Tennessee. And so the Patriots, they're going to anchor those trenches, get a tackle, move them wherever you need to. But who was their tackle? Who's their left tackle that was there last year? I'm trying to remember.
Was it Isaiah Wynn?
Yes, Isaiah Wynn.
Trent Williams, the other Trent.
Yeah, Trent guy was on the right. I'm talking about the left, Isaiah Wynn. he was on the trade talks like the whole of last year. I don't even know if he's still there, like if he left in free agency or something. I don't know what his contract was, but
I'll check.
regardless, it was very clear that they were looking to move on, and so I'm assuming that he's no longer there, and they were trying to trade him before the contract ran out, and now we have Darnell Wright from Tennessee taking that spot over on the left side. Trent Brown, by the way, that's who it was. Trent Brown.
And Isaiah Wynn's still a Patriot. I guess he got signed a minimum or something.
Well, still Patriot, but regardless, once again, he was all in the trade block, and so I have him moving off him pretty much and taking Darnell Wright. And now number 15, your Green Bay Packers. And I think you're going to like this pick. My number 2 receiver in the class, and I know that this would be ironic because I was sitting there thinking, remember when Seattle traded away Russell Wilson and then finally took offensive line in the first round? Imagine that Green Bay finally decides to take a receiver in the first round, but it was after they traded away Aaron Rodgers. Zay Flowers going to the Green Bay Packers. Just the combo of him and Christian Watson, I think, could be insanely deadly. What are your thoughts on this pick?
I would love it. Gosh, yeah, and I'm sure Rodgers would be pissed too because okay, great. So now you go get help. Now you go get me a dynamic guy in Zay Flowers that can work inside. Just like we mentioned, I feel like we both felt, or I definitely felt he can be a 3-level receiver, but definitely short to intermediate stuff. That was kind of what he was missing. I feel like at the end too was the reliable Randall Cobbs, Greg Jennings, Donald Drivers. That they were so reliable in the slot, and then like in those scramble drills, or just reading zones. So nonetheless, a great piece to find out more. If just invest more into Jordan Love, so that you'll know if he's the guy or not. Because you gave him all the weapons, line's still good, running back's still good, and been in that system. So I absolutely love that pick. And I would, I might. Who knows what my financial situation may be draft night. I may have to, if that happens, I may have to invest in a Zay Flowers jersey. But yeah. So nonetheless, absolutely love the pick. Thank you, GM John.
Yeah, and I just thought that this would be such a home run for the offense as a whole because we saw the creative ways they were able to get the ball in Christian Watson's hands. And Watson is kind of a similar type of receiver in terms of like speed and the deep threat ability, but the difference is that he's the big body. He can be the tall, go up and win a contested catch kind of guy as he continues to grow into his role. Zay Flowers, like you said, he can play in the slot. He can do a lot of the short to intermediate stuff. He's more agile, better route runner. He's a little bit more refined than Christian Watson is, and so he can really make things work in some of those areas that Watson is lacking, but both are very explosive players, and so you put them in the same offense, and things could just get really crazy. So that's who I have at number 15. At number 16, this is once again a spot where I'm trying to take my own personal bias out of this. This is interesting because Washington could go with the quarterback here, but I think they might give Sam Howell a year. I don't know.
Again, reports indicate that as well. So you're on the right track.
I haven't seen anything that would indicate that they're wanting a quarterback. It could be all smoke and mirrors or something. But also, I do think that Sam Howell was, at least from what he showed in like the 2-3 games that he played last year, it wasn't so bad that you're like, all right, let's just move off of him. So I'm gonna forego QB. They couldn't cover anybody last year. The corner situation was terrible. I mean, who was it that they signed from Cincinnati? William Jackson.
That was one I missed on. I was high on him.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great signing too, and it clearly did not work out. We're going to have him taking Christian Gonzalez. Stud athlete, great corner. Once again, try to remove my personal bias. He was my number 2 cornerback in the class, and I do think they need corner, so they fill the need. And we're going to go and stick with corner here. At number 17, like father, like son, Joey Porter played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and so does Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. Also, they do need defensive back help. The Steelers need quite a bit of help kind of all over the place, but they do need defensive back help. And I think that Joey Porter Jr. just kind of fits what I imagine a Pittsburgh Steeler would be. He's big, he's fast, he can be physical. I don't know. I just think the familiarity there with the father and all that kind of stuff could be intriguing, and he fills a need. So Joey Porter Jr. at number 17. And now we got the Lions back up on the clock. The Lions are interesting. They could go a lot of different ways. But earlier we had them taking Devon Witherspoon at corner. I thought about double dipping and taking 2 corners, but I don't think that's necessarily realistic. If they do, I think it would be later in the draft they take another one. And so here we're going to go get a partner in crime for Mr. Aiden Hutchinson, and that is going to be Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. Solid defensive end prospect, could potentially even go higher than pick 18, just depending on how some other people rank these defensive end classes. But I just think that Lucas Van Ness, he'd be a really solid edge rusher on the opposite side, and we know how much this team loves the guys who are going to go bite some kneecaps. I think that Lucas Van Ness can be one of those guys.
I agree, by the way, in regards to Lucas Van Ness. I think he's a perfect Robin. He reminds
Right.
me, he's going to do all the dirty work. He's going to be one of those, was it Olivier Vernon, right? That a long time where he was always like in the 10 sack range, and people would knock on him. Well, he's not a great pass rusher, he's got a lot of sacks, but his value is that he's great in the run game as well. So yeah, we didn't get to talk edge, but I feel like Van Ness is going to be one of those like him, where he just has a solid career. I think he looks like. So yeah, that would be great for the. As a Packer fan, I would hate it, but in terms of Lions, that'd be a great fit to have him and Hutchinson on either end, because Hutchinson's a good run defender too. So it's like, man,
Right.
then it creates issues. In regards to what do you want to do against that defense.
Yeah, and I hadn't even read this from PFF, but this is a little quick first look of him. And this was one of the reasons that I ended up having them pick him, is that for most of his career, he did actually end up playing on the inside of the defensive line, and he moved out to an edge defender last year. And I just think that kind of versatility, once again, this team has really invested in the trenches the last handful of years. They've drafted Aiden Hutchinson and a couple different defensive linemen in the top 2 rounds over the last handful of years. I think they continue to dip into that pool of talent and really just build their identity around offensive and defensive lines. So they take Lucas Van Ness. And this is where the Buccaneers come out of the clock. Personally, this is not what I would do, but I think that this is what they're going to do if this happens. They're going to take Will Levis out of Kentucky. Okay. Like I said, I'm not sure if I would take a QB after those top 3 in the first round, but I just I didn't know what Tampa would do, because they have a lot of old talent that they could look to replace. And so I think they could go a lot of different ways. I thought about maybe taking interior offensive line because I didn't think their guard play was super strong. I thought about taking maybe a linebacker to potentially replace Levante David in the future.
And apparently Devin White, because there was that report a couple weeks ago that he wants out. So who knows?
Yeah, I even thought of maybe taking a receiver because Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, you never know how long they last. But I ended up going Will Levis because, once again, there was just too many options that I couldn't make my mind up. And honestly, I could totally see them just going out and getting a quarterback because Tom Brady's gone. The fan base might feel pretty down after that because once a guy like him leaves, it doesn't look too bright. So you get a good young quarterback, they can put their hope in.
And Baker can maybe at least play for the first few weeks or give him some competition. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? I'm not, you know how I feel about Baker, so I don't even really view him as as anything to be worried about for Will Levis. But best case scenario, Baker can play for a year or two because I'm not sure Will Levis is necessarily guaranteed to start right away. At number 20, Seattle Seahawks are back on the clock. Earlier, we had them taking Tyree Wilson, an edge rusher. They continue to have some more needs. I mean, we could dip into the interior of the offensive line, but I think we're going to continue to bolster that defensive line. Once again, it's kind of been something that they've lacked ever since, the days of Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill and some of those guys back on that Legion of Boom defense. They're gone. And so this is where we're going to have Brian Breesy out of Clemson. He's going to slot in, him and Tyree Jackson next to each other. He's going to be more so on the inside, but at the same time, I could see him potentially even getting some work on the outside. I do think that he has that ability to be versatile and potentially play some reps out on the edge. And so just that versatility of being able to do both, I think could be really important for the Seattle Seahawks. Next up, technically at 21, we would have Miami, but they have forfeited their pick because of tampering. So we move on to the LA Chargers, and this is going to be, once again, a position that I personally would not do. But I really think that I'm so sold on the Chargers. If this man is available, they're going to do it. and that's going to be Bijan Robinson out of Texas. Austin Eckler has requested a trade. I don't see why the Chargers would prevent him from leaving. I don't think that he has that much left in the tank for them anyway. And I do think that they've kind of lacked a guy who could be a workhorse running back for them. I thought about going receiver here because the health of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen last year really concerned me. But then I thought, let's solve two birds with one stone. Your receivers are kind of lacking, and your running back wants to leave. Just replace them with a workhorse running back and then run the ball more so that Justin Herbert doesn't have to sit there and throw to, Joshua Palmer the whole game. And I do think that maybe if they're running the ball a little bit more, once again, that could take some pressure off the passing game as a whole and theoretically could help Keenan Allen as he's kind of getting older in age. It was tough for me I'll say this. If it was really up to me, I personally would have taken Jackson Smith and Jigba here because I just think he's a great prospect. My first mock, I actually did have them taking him here. But in that mock, I actually had Bijan going way earlier to Philadelphia. And then I changed that around because I figured with Philadelphia having 2 first-round picks, they might try to wait till the end of the first round. But in this one, I don't know. I just thought I remembered the Austin Eckler situation, and I thought, even if they keep Eckler, taking Bijan, you keep Eckler for another year, and then you let Eckler walk after that, I could see it happening for the Chargers. Once again, I'm not necessarily sold on doing that. I don't think any running back should be a first-round pick, but I'm not going to be upset about it if they do it because Bijan is a really good prospect. Usually running backs, it's very easy to tell they're going to be successful, and Bijan's that kind of guy. Moving on. The Ravens was pretty easy. I think they need a cornerback pretty heavily. I do think they could use some receiver talent, but ultimately it seems like they don't really invest that much in receivers in the first round, and everybody thinks they should outside of that Rashad Bateman pick. So we're going to jump down to cornerback, and I have them taking Deontay Banks out of Maryland. Just a solid corner. I'm not super high on him compared to some of these other guys, but I do think in terms of fit, he makes sense. Once again, Maryland, very close to Baltimore, kind of a hometown guy. I don't know where I actually grew up, but in terms of college, like he's nearby. And so overall, Deontay Banks, I think that's where he'd go. Also, he's really fast, like athletic corner, just pretty decent overall. Anyway, at number 23, Minnesota, they have Justin Jefferson, and that's basically it. KJ Osborne is the next best receiver, and if Jackson Smith and Jigba is there, I don't see them passing up on that opportunity. Adam Thielen is gone. They need somebody to replace him. I think that Jackson Smith and Jigba could thrive in that same kind of role of the intermediate stuff, the Robin to Justin Jefferson's Batman. I do think that he's actually even better than, being a Robin. Like, I think he could be a number 1 receiver. He was the number 3 receiver on my class, or on my rankings. But yeah, the fact that he's there at number 23 in the real draft, I don't expect this to happen, but it's just kind of the way that it fell. I have him going to the Minnesota Vikings. And number 20. By the way,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Minnesota's was a tough spot. I don't know if it was for you because, apparently they're flirting with quarterbacks, and then do they address defense because they've let go of why am I forgetting their middle linebacker?
Kendricks, Eric Kendricks.
Eric Kendricks. Okay, Eric Kendricks, and obviously they've lost a lot of corners and. So, and then I think they lost to Darius Smith too on the edge, who had a solid year for them. So, yeah, Jackson Smith and Jigba absolutely makes sense too. Just at least build on the offense, like you said. But yeah, Minnesota was a tough one for me, just to see where they were going, and kind of like what you said with Tampa. Those are two teams where I'm like, I have no clue, no inkling really, like what way they're leaning because they have needs on both sides of the ball and at multiple positions.
Right. I felt the same way, but just the way that my mock draft ended up falling with Jackson Smith and Jigba, it felt like a Cowboys CeeDee Lamb situation. Like, the guy's there, you have other needs, you're going to take him. Like, that's just how it's going to be because I think that at that point, he's the best player on the board. He shouldn't fall to number 23. I think he should go higher than that. But that's just kind of how my board ended up falling. At number 24... The Jaguars, they need help at corner. The Shaquille Griffin signing did not necessarily work out, in my opinion, as much as some people probably hoped. They added Tyson Campbell, and I think that he could be a solid corner. And you know what? Why not just get the guy who ended up replacing him at Georgia to partner him with? Keely Ringo, fast, tall, A lot of potential. I do think there could be some other ways that Jacksonville goes here with maybe some offensive line help, maybe an edge rusher or something along those lines. But ultimately, there was a point last year where it was like them and the Lions were the two worst secondaries in the league, and I think that you got to address it. We already had Detroit addressing it with Devon Witherspoon, and now we have Jacksonville addressing it with Keely Ringo. The Giants come up. Once again, I had to remove my bias here. I think if Jackson Smith and Jigba was to fall this far, they're going to try and call up and trade with one of these teams because I think they'd be rather desperate for a guy like that. But in this hypothetical scenario where those top three receivers are off the board, Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't have them actually going for receiver here, and I could see them, I don't know, taking a linebacker. I've been hearing a lot of buzz about Jack Campbell. The Giants have just needed a linebacker for a decade. I've heard so many times about the Giants needing a linebacker that it's not even funny, and they just continue to not do it. But with a new GM, new front office, new coach, all these kind of things, we've seen, with some of these teams that these guys have been on in the past. I think with the Bills, with Dayball, they invested very heavily in the linebacker position. We talk about the Patriots, where the GM is from, right? The Giants GM is from the Patriots. Or is he also from the Bills? Regardless, both of those teams invested in the linebacker position pretty heavily over the years and always had really solid linebackers. I'm pretty sure he's from the Patriots. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure he's from the Bills. And the Patriots guy went to Houston, is what I'm thinking.
Sorry.
No, you're good. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Regardless, Jack Campbell, linebacker, Giants. I try to take my personal bias out of this one once again because NFC East rival. Fills a need. There you go.
He was the Bills assistant GM from 2017 to 2021, so you're correct.
Okay.
He came from Buffalo.
Yeah, the Patriots guy, like I said, he went to Houston.
Nick Caserio.
Yeah. Now we're on to my Dallas Cowboys. I disagree with PFF's assessment of our needs. We could take a linebacker, but I don't think we necessarily need one because we got Micah Parsons, who they can move around. We got Leighton Vander Esch, who they brought back for another year, and they have a couple different guys like Jabril Cox, who I'm pretty excited about.
I like Cox coming out. I thought he had some good moments.
Gosh, they have another linebacker that I'm blanking on his name, but I was so excited about him last year because he's really good.
And then running back. I think I'm with you, or especially now that Robinson's off the board, I don't think Dallas invests the first round pick. Maybe they get a guy 2 or 3, but not here.
Yeah. Damone Clark, that was who the linebacker was.
Yes.
He was pretty solid last year, also very athletic. I don't know. I don't think that they end up taking linebacker here. And yeah, with Tony Pollard still there, if Bijan Robinson is somehow available, I wouldn't be shocked if Jerry Jones gets so in love with the guy and that he takes him, but I don't think that's going to end up happening. And although that the Cowboys have not done this in a super long time, I think that they're finally going to take a safety in the first round. That's going to be Brian Branch out of Alabama. The Cowboys have really started to mix it up this offseason in ways that I have never expected. I didn't think they would ever trade for people like Brandon Cooks and Stephon Gilmore. And those were the two needs that I thought they would take in this draft. I thought they would go out and get a receiver or a cornerback. They addressed it through trade. And so now they kind of have the luxury of going through a couple of different positions. I could see interior defensive line going, but I don't really love the options after Brian Breesy that are available, especially at this pick in the first round. If they were going to do that, I'd prefer they would trade back. I could maybe see them going edge, but still, once again, when you got Micah Parsons, you got a couple different options. You can just move things around. But the edge would be more likely if they were going to take somebody else because maybe you're trying to get a DeMarcus Lawrence replacement for the future. And then I've seen some people say tight end. I'm not necessarily sold on that. I still think that they're going to roll.
I thought you were going for a second. You're hovering over Dalton Kincaid, and I was like, wait a minute.
I accidentally clicked Dalton Kincaid. I just think that the fact that they drafted Jake Ferguson last year in the 4th round, they picked up Peyton Hendershot as an undrafted free agent, and both of them had weeks where they were very strong contributors last season. And then you got guys like Travis Kelce, the best tight end in the league, saying that the Cowboys got a special tight end in Jake Ferguson. I just can't see the Cowboys investing in the tight end last year only to then grab one in the first round this year when they were both rather promising. So I don't see them going tight end. Now we go to the Buffalo Bills, and this is a classic position where I think a lot of mock drafters are going to go, oh, they're going to take a running back, and they're going to have them draft like Jahmyr Gibbs. It just doesn't make sense to me because they got James Cook last year, and they've continued to pass up on Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker and all these guys, and they just don't do it. But I still think they need to address the run game, and that's why we're going to go out and get an interior offensive lineman, Osiris Torrance, to help beef up the run because they can't run the ball that effectively when they need to. You're going to get some size on the inside of that line. You're going to get someone who can help you just power it up the middle. I mean, even if it's Josh Allen running the ball, getting someone like Osiris Torrance to help out on the inside to just create ways through the middle and hopefully just make the run game a little bit more consistent. That was my decision for that pick because I don't know, when I think of the Bills, I think they have so many different pieces. Sure, they could try and strengthen other areas, but I'm just trying to focus on what can make this run game work and allow for Josh Allen to have some of the pressure taken off of him. I think beefing up the interior offensive line can do that. We go on to the Bengals. I'm gonna have them draft Dalton Kincaid, the tight end here. They have Jamar Chase. They have T. Higgins, two great playmakers. Tyler Boyd is kind of getting to a point where I think it's time to start looking for a replacement. They could go receiver, but I have him taking a different kind of playmaker in Dalton Kincaid. He's not the best overall tight end in the class, in my opinion. I would give that to Michael Mayer, but I do think that he is a better receiving talent. And I don't think that the Bengals are necessarily going to care about the blocking ability of Meyer over the receiving talent of Kincaid. I think that Kincaid can be another weapon in the red zone. And then that pass attack with him, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, I almost said Tyler Higgins, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow, things are just, it's going to get crazy. And especially considering that the offensive line, I mean, they've really invested in it, and you got protection. Go out and make the weapons just unstoppable. Dalton Kincaid, that's who I got for the Bengals. The Saints are here. The Saints need so much, and yet here they are at pick 29. I just went with who I thought was best available left on this board because I just don't think that there's a ton that they can really do. The biggest standout piece to me that they're going to have to replace in the future is going to be Cameron Jordan, and so we're going to go get Miles Murphy, edge rusher out of Clemson. He does have some versatility. He can move around to different spots on the defensive line. But once again, overall, the entire defensive line for them needs help. Like they just, I could also see them going corner here because Paulson Adebo last year wasn't the greatest. They get so many things, but Miles Murphy, we're gonna have him take him there, pretty open and shut.
It's unfortunate for the Saints too. I mean, I agree that they still need edge, but yeah, they've tried. They traded up. They traded a first round pick.
Yes.
That's how we got Jair for Marcus Davenport.
Yes.
Didn't really work out. And then even the other guy they picked, Peyton Turner, back in 2021. I remember even then people were questioning that pick. Even Cameron Jordan himself wasn't too ecstatic about it on the Bleacher Report because he was doing live with them. So he didn't seem too ecstatic at the time. So and here we are back again. Saints need another edge. So hopefully they can get their guy.
Yep, and here we are with the Philadelphia Eagles back on the clock at pick number 30. There's a couple different ways they could go. They did pick earlier in the draft. And they took a defensive lineman to address the interior of the defense. And I thought about a couple different options. I tossed around potentially taking a receiver, maybe like Jordan Addison here, but I'm going to end up going at a cornerback spot, and I just think that, there was rumors of them moving off of Darius Slay. There was some issues maybe with James Bradbury. They end up keeping them both, but those aren't long-term options. At some point, they're going to have to address the cornerback spot, and this is where we're going to take your guy, DJ Turner from Michigan. Like I said, in our rankings, I had him about number 6, 7. I think that he's a really talented corner. I think that he fits what Philadelphia wants to do. I think he gives them much needed depth in the immediate, and then I think in the future he can potentially turn into one of their starting corners. Any thoughts?
I mean, love my guy, and yeah, he can play in the slot year one if he really needs to. Although I know I think they still have Avonte Maddox, but yeah, I think it's good insurance too because both those corners, I mean, even they're already iffy on Bradbury and Slay.
Yep.
Even if they are older, one of them gets hurt, at least you're not, as handicapped. Okay, maybe you move DJ Turner outside, bring back Avonte Maddox, and gives you a little more flexibility. And like you mentioned, they already addressed kind of their front seven in regards to the earlier pick. Still good at receiver. They're all O line. They kind of addressed last year. They drafted a center in the second round last year. In case Kelsey did retire, he didn't. He's back.
Yep.
And so their line still is going to be pretty good. And yes, they could need a guard. I think Samuelu, their starting guard, who is arguably, and this is no slight, but their worst lineman, he was taken. But guard, you can find you can find later in the draft too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am obviously love DJ Turner. That would not be a fun pick if they do make that. If he does live up to what I think he could be, and obviously what you think he could be in Philly.
Yeah, and the biggest reason too that I have them addressing corner here, because once again, I thought the addition of Jordan Addison seems very enticing to get that trio of Jordan Addison and the two guys they already got over there. I mean, it could be scary. That said, you look at the Cowboys, who are your prime competition for this division. They got Michael Gallup, obviously. They got CeeDee Lamb, and they got now Brandon Cooks. They have three great receivers, and the fact that last year in the game that they ended up losing where Dallas put up 40 points, the way that they did that was moving CeeDee Lamb into the slot. I know, like you said, you brought up Avonte Maddox. The guy got cooked. I just don't think that he can really hold up in the slot when it comes to a guy like CeeDee Lamb. That's why I think they make that investment, like you said. DJ Turner, he can play in the nickel. He can be that guy who can move into there. He's got really good speed, and you put him there, and then once again, over time, he can potentially take over on the outside when those other guys are gone. And then finally, we get to the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a couple different options here. They could go Jordan Addison. They could end up taking a tackle. They could go a lot of different ways. But I actually ended up going with a tackle because I think that they lost Orlando Brown Jr. He goes to Cincinnati. I can't remember if they picked up anybody in free agency notable.
Juan Taylor, because where they gave him, I think, a similar contract to what Brown got originally.
Really?
And I guess people are theorizing they're going to move him to left tackle. And yeah, but there's still a need at the other tackle spot because Andrew Wiley, their
Right.
starting right tackle last year, he got signed to the Commanders.
Hold on, I want to look at this contract. Wow, he did
yeah,
4 years, $80 million. That's a big contract.
60 guaranteed, I think. I was looking, but
yeah,
so similar guaranteed money too. I think Brown got 65, 63.
So, I mean, in reality, that could change things. Maybe they take Jordan Addison, but I'm going to stick with my pick because I just think that protecting Patrick Mahomes is the ultimate priority. You still got good weapons for the most part, and I do think that with some of the young guys they have at receiver, that's kind of why I'm avoiding Jordan Addison at this spot is because why am I blanking on their names? The two receivers they got. One they traded from the Giants.
Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore.
Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. Yes, I have them both on my dynasty team. I think that they just give them an opportunity this year, and maybe they get another receiver later in the draft. And so we had him taking DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. Once again, he could play multiple sides, but I think he's probably best on the right because his teammate, Mr. Paris Johnson Jr., was the one playing on the left at Ohio State. And I didn't even know they had Juwan Taylor, but the fact that you said that, I mean, DeJuan Jones can play on that right side, and boom, your tackles are figured out, and your offensive line is still great. So this is my overall mock draft. You can see it on screen, the whole deal. Once again, a lot of these are what I would do, but for some of these picks, like the Chargers, fellow NFC East teams, or some of the positions where I was kind of confused, like because they have so many needs, like the Buccaneers or the Saints, I just went with who I think they would take in real life, and that is my draft. Any thoughts?
No, you're gonna see with mine. There's a few similarities. I think for the most part, like in regards to people taking in the first round, there may be only like one or two guys that you have on here that I didn't have, but like maybe we didn't get to do inside linebackers, safeties, right, or the defensive tackles or even defensive ends. So we can talk about that. But for the most part, kind of in the same thought process. Obviously, I remember. I know I was high on Hendon Hooker. My boy Sims is high on Hendon Hooker. And obviously, like we mentioned, there's no trades, but we feel like probably at the end, in the 20s/30s. Don't be shocked if a team trades in, grabs a quarterback like him,
Right.
or and like you mentioned, I think Jackson Jigba Smith. I don't think he's gonna fall to 23 in real life. I assume a team there will be a trade if he's still sitting there after my Packers. At 16, 17. One of those teams may like, especially you mentioned the Bucks. Maybe the Bucks someone wants to trade up to grab him then. Bucks, I could see a Bucks taking a trade where they get more value, move back, because like we said, they're a team that needs, probably needs more picks, and I'm with you. I expect Arizona. Won't be shocked if Arizona moves out of 3 because they need help on both sides of the ball. So,
Yeah, and once again, without any trades, there's just some stuff that, for example, the Jets here. I'm guessing the Aaron Rodgers thing happens, and I'd kind of be surprised if this pick is not included.
Okay.
So there could be some things that actually happen in real life that would change things up. Now, I could actually see the Packers still taking Paris Johnson Jr. there, so I wouldn't be shocked if the pick was the same. But regardless, yeah, there could be some trades ultimately. But yeah, that's my draft.
Love it. I don't really, like I said, I don't have really any big issues. Definitely not as worse as mine. I think last the year, did I have who did I have? Was it Fields or I had either Fields or Lance not going in the first round, and that was just not. But once again, that's just our personal preference. But
To be fair,
yeah,
both of us were very low on Lance, and he hasn't necessarily shown that we're wrong yet. So
yeah. So anyhow, yeah, I got no qualms, man. It's a great one, and like I said, especially Houston is very interesting at 2, and yeah, I agree with it, Jalen. Like I said, you're gonna see with mine. We have a lot of similarities. Maybe not exact players, but even position wise, in terms of needs, I feel like we'll be the same. But like I said, some of them were exactly the same. So.